You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com, the ChrisVossShow.com. Hey, we're coming here with another great podcast. We certainly appreciate you guys tuning in. We have all the best authors, and if you didn't think we had the best authors on yet, they just keep getting better, and we have better today. So you're going to be able to enjoy this wonderful conversation we are going to have, and it's going to expand your mind. It's pretty cool. It's not about politics, which is kind of nice for a change. In the meantime, you can see the video version of this, youtube.com/Chris Voss. Hit that bell notification button. And you can also go to amzn.com/shop/Chris Voss. You can see all the wonderful authors that have been on the show, and you can click and buy their books separately, or just, run that credit card up. Buy them all at a time. Besides, what else are you going to do? You're stuck in the coronavirus quarantine. Today we're going to be talking to Eric Weiner. He's the author of the Socrates Express, In Search of Life Lessons from Dead Philosophers. He is the award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and speaker. His books include The Geography of Bliss, The Geography of Genius, as well as Man Seeks God, and the Socrates Express, of course, which we have here today. This is a beautiful book. There you go, nice and thick. His books have been translated into more than 20 languages. Eric is a former foreign correspondent for NPR and reporter for the New York Times. He is a regular contributor to the Washington Post, BBC Travel, and Afar, among other publications. Welcome to the show, Eric. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Happy to be here, Chris.
Awesome sauce. And so we've got this is the Advanced Readers Edition. This was kind of special. We got a hold of here. So the Socrates Express. What motivated you to write this book?
There's the finished product.
There you go. I got a label on mine. This makes it special. I think.
Yours is better. Yours is better. Yeah,
I got the label. I'll sell it to you on eBay. Doesn't have an autograph though. I'll have to look up the author.
Well, mail it to me and I'll sign it. Then
that sounds like a deal. That sounds like a deal. And then I can put it on eBay. I'm just kidding. We're having some fun here. Eric, why did you write the book? What motivated you there, buddy?
It was really this thing. It's not on now because I'm talking to you, but it's my iPhone thingy. You probably have an iPhone thingy, an iThingy yourself.
I got a Samsung thingy from
Samsung thingy, yeah. And so with these smartphones, we've got basically all of human knowledge, from the ancient Egyptians to theoretical physics, available at the swipe of a finger. Probably, I think it's safe to say, never before in human history have we had access to so much knowledge. And so many people have had so much access. And yet, are we happier? Are we leading richer, more meaningful lives? And I would argue the answer is no. And the reason, I think, is that we are awash in information, but woefully lacking in wisdom. And that's really the genesis for my book, is this hunger, really, for wisdom, not for more data bits, not for more information, not even for more knowledge, but wisdom. And we often conflate the two, knowledge and wisdom, but they're different. Knowledge is something you possess. Wisdom is something you do. My favorite explanation for the difference comes from a British musician and journalist named Miles Kington. And he said, knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad. And that is wise, and that is true. So wisdom is applied knowledge, and you're probably thinking, well, what does this have to do with philosophy and philosophers? Well, the word philosophy comes from the ancient Greek philosophos, which means love of wisdom, and a philosopher is someone who loves wisdom, and that's the launching point for the journey on the Socrates Express.
We've like you said, we have a lot of information, but not a lot of knowledge. Clearly, you've been on Twitter. So give us an overview of the book and stuff.
Well, this is a book about philosophy for people who would never pick up a book about philosophy. The comedian Steve Martin majored in philosophy as an undergrad, and he famously said, well, if you major in any other subject, you forget it the second you graduate. But if you major in philosophy, you retain just enough to screw you up for the rest of your life. And I think, unfortunately, that's the impression of philosophy, that it's something that will mess with your head, or it's something that's difficult, something you're likely to flunk out of in college. And it really didn't start out that way. Back in ancient Greek, a couple thousand years ago, it started out as this love of wisdom. It's where people went to get in shape physically and to get in shape mentally, and to learn how to be wiser. So I approached the book through that practical lens, and each chapter is actually a how-to chapter with very basic things like how to walk, how to get out of bed, how to wonder, how to listen, how to fight, how to be kind, and getting later on in the day and in life, how to grow old and even how to die. Channeling one philosopher through me to sort of wrestle with that how-to question. It's about life. It's a user's manual to life.
User's manual to life. I like that.
Yeah.
There's pictures of this. How to get out of bed like Marcus Aurelius.
Yes, he was a Roman emperor. He was a pretty powerful dude. Even he had a bigger empire than you, Chris. This is how big this guy was.
Really? Wow.
Yes. Yeah. He had like 10 podcasts, and he was, seriously, he was a Roman emperor in the first century AD, controlled a quarter of the world population, huge territory, but he couldn't get out of bed in the morning. He writes in his book called Meditations, which is this very confessional sort of like journal. In fact, it was a journal. He writes about lots of things, but one of them is how he has trouble getting out of bed in the morning, and how he uses his philosophy. He was a Stoic philosopher and emperor to help him get out of bed. And what's more practical than that?
Yeah. Most definitely. He clearly didn't have Death Wish Coffee, brought to you by deathwishcoffee.com and powered by the Chris Voss
Show. Marcus lived 1,000 years. He lived about 1,000 years before coffee was invented. You see,
oh, God.
That was his bad, totally his bad.
No wonder he should have worked that out differently.
He should have, totally. Do not want to be living 1,000 years before coffee. Note to self.
So it looks like there's some different titles here. See like Thoreau, fight like Gandhi, which is kind of interesting. We'll get into that. Be kind like Confucius, have no regrets like Nietzsche. Grow old like Beauvoir. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but tell us more about what those are about. Beauvoir. Clearly.
Yeah, so it is again these very basic things that we do that we think we know how to do, but we don't, right? And this is sort of what philosophy is all about. It's about questioning the obvious. And you said, here's a show that's not about politics, and you're mostly right, a little bit wrong, in that it's relevant to our time. Okay, no, it's not really about politics. We don't question our assumptions. We think we know how to see. For instance, if you could hold up your coffee mug there for a second.
Okay.
Thank you. So you think that you are looking at the coffee mug, and that most people think of it as a thank you. Is that one of your sponsors or something?
No, it's just a cheap try. It says hot stuff on it, but
okay.
It's supposed to reflect my looks.
You think that you're looking at the hot stuff coffee mug as a sort of photograph, that your mind's eye is just taking a photograph and you're seeing it, but that's not how it works. In fact, you, Chris, are having a conversation with the hot stuff coffee mug. It is merely sending electromagnetic waves to your eye and then to your brain, and then your brain sort of decodes it and says, what is this? Looks like a coffee mug. These letters look familiar. Yes, I think it's a coffee mug. And that sort of conversation happens very quickly, and usually it's efficient and effective. And so you pick up and you drink out of the coffee mug, and not out of the microphone, which would be bad. And
I've had those nights with drinking, though.
Right, drinking out of the microphone and talking into the coffee mug. Yeah. But the point is that we need to slow it down, said Henry David Thoreau. He saw more than we did. And he would say, well, wait, you think that's a coffee mug? Maybe it's not. And he thought as soon as you define something or somebody, you stop seeing them. You've defined them. This is a coffee mug. this is a guy with a baseball hat on and a microphone, and we need to slow down the seeing process and sort of have that conversation, but have it more slowly.
I love the thinking behind that. So basically what you did is you took some of this philosophy and you turned it into like everyday techniques. And so you made it easier for people to connect the dots between the two things. Because some people look at philosophy and, they go, oh, wow, that's too little too airy for me.
It's not, I mean, if being happy is too airy for you, then yeah, but that's really what it's about. And unfortunately, in schools and colleges, it's not taught in this way. Mm-hmm. It's not taught as a love of wisdom. It's taught as a love of analysis and logic chopping, some people call it. And, there's a place for that in philosophy, but its original purpose was about how to get through a day, how to get out of bed, how to see more beauty in everyday events and everyday places and people, and how to cope. I mean, we can talk about that for a second if you like.
Sure, let's get into that.
There's a chapter called How to Cope, like the Stoics, and it's kind of timely now because we need some coping. So Stoic is it's a term most people know, but like most of these terms, it's a little bit off base. We think of a Stoic as someone with a stiff upper lip who just doesn't grumble, doesn't complain, doesn't feel anything, sort of like Mr. Spock in Star Trek. The Stoics, in fact, were much more than that. They really believed in a joyful life, but they thought too many of us spend too much time trying to control things we can't control, and not enough time controlling what we can control. So they would see people then, as in now, chasing money, fame, fortune, whatever it is, and not getting it and having setbacks. And the Stoics would say, you cannot control that. All you can control is your reaction to events. And even something as horrible as this pandemic need not depress us, and it need not devastate us. The Stoics thought that we sort of, we give away our agency and our control over our lives, and we say, oh, bad things are happening, I must be miserable now. Not to take anything away from the bad things, but often we make them worse through these mental habits. And the Stoics thought that we need to exercise sort of more control, again, to pause. Like, if you were to bang your head into the microphone really hard, I'm not suggesting you do that, accidentally, it would hurt, and that would be a physical sensation. And the Stoics would say, okay, Chris hurt his head. But then you might dwell on that for the rest of the interview and the rest of the day and complain to whoever, wife, kids, whoever, saying my head hurts, and it could ruin the rest of your life. I mean, it's a slight exaggeration. The Stoics would say you banged your head against your microphone. You can't control that. You can't control the bump on your head, but you can control the rest of it.
Definitely. It's interesting to me how, these I don't know what the most earliest philosopher was, but isn't it interesting how all this stuff still applies like thousands and thousands of years later? It
is. But yet, Greek knowledge, we started off talking about information and knowledge. Like, we don't really want to use Greek pharmaceuticals from 2,000 years ago. That would probably be a mistake, you know? And Greek technology, we've made great advances, but that's because knowledge is perishable and wisdom is not. So that's why it's still applicable. I mean, we're still human beings. And we think we're so advanced because we've got these gadgets and other gadgets. But really, we suffer for the same reason the ancient philosophers do, and we exalt for the same reasons. And yet we think it's all about knowledge and technology when really wisdom is what life is all about.
Would you say that we're collectively we're in search of that, of the knowledge that you have in the book? Subconsciously, and we feel that by collecting all this BS on Facebook and Twitter that somehow we're going to fill that void, but we never do.
That's a really good.
Searching for more of it, and
that's a very good question, very good point. I think you're right. I think we have this hunger for wisdom, but it ends up getting directed, as you say, into this search for stuff And sort of knowledge and Facebook followers and Twitter followers become things that we amass. They become stuff that we accumulate. And we think that if we just know more and have more information, we'll achieve this state of wisdom. And that's not the case. You can know too much, and as you're aware, you can have too much information coming at you. It can actually be detrimental. I mean, actually harmful. Where you become less wise the more information that bombards you. And maybe you've met people who are very knowledgeable, usually about a certain subject. They usually specialize, but they're not particularly happy or not particularly wise, So I think we're confused. And some people look for wisdom in religion. I know if you watch your show, you're not a religious person. So there's some people who have problems with religion as an answer to the wisdom question. And then what are we left with? We're left with science and psychology, and that's helpful up to a point, but I think that we're missing out on kind of the search for wisdom that's kind of just stripped bare, in philosophy. It doesn't usually have fancy statistics and terms attached to it the way psychology does. It doesn't have the whole religious infrastructure, I'll just say that, attached to it. So it's just, people trying to figure out what does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to lead a good life? And how should I go about it? And I don't know, we're racing around, we're distressed now because of the pandemic. And yet I've talked to friends, and maybe you've experienced this too, people who are thinking now actually is a time to stop, pause, and think about what the hell am I doing with my life? Even when the pandemic's over, what am I doing?
Yeah, it's definitely a good time, and always a good time. I think I'm loving this discussion we're having right here, because I know that I always want to be smarter, and I think most people do that, whether they're searching for what you mentioned, meaning in life, or whether they're just searching to just for a self-satisfaction, or maybe a little bit of a narcissistic sort of thing. Well, I want to be smart so I can be smarter than everyone else.
Yeah, that's not the smart that I admire, to be honest. No, seriously, I've known people like that in my life who have lots of book knowledge, but are not wise. And there are people who can use knowledge as a kind of weapon.
Yeah.
And I hate to get into politics, but certain people on one end of the spectrum might denigrate certain people on the other end of the spectrum. Let's just leave it at that and say you're not smart, you don't know what you're talking about, and that's a way to shut down a conversation. Knowledge should be something you share, not a weapon you wield. And wisdom would never be that. Wisdom is, I would say there's no such thing as narcissistic wisdom. There is such a thing as narcissistic knowledge. Let's put it that way.
There you go. Yeah. So, so would you say narcissistic knowledge then would be the attempt to acquire information? Because I'll give you an example, like for conspiracy theories. Well, I'll give you a broad example. Actually, this solves a lot of my issues, and you've heard about some of them. I grew up in a cult. I grew up with trying to be programmed into a certain religious slant, and I've spent my whole life, because this has been a scar that I've tried to heal. It doesn't help. My family's involved in it still. But my search for being has always been, why do people choose to believe what they do? Not just their religion, but like if you decide, hey, politicians, lizard people. Hey, there's little blue aliens living amongst us. Whatever you choose to believe you do, my children are tools of Satan, so we must put them in the bathtub. All that sort of stuff. And you see people that recently we've seen a lot of people, and I think part of it's mental health for what's going on with this, subscribe to these conspiracy theories. And it's interesting to me how deep they'll go in, like for anything. I mean, even me, I have a pretty depth of atheism and what it is. And they go really deep. And so I wonder if some of that narcissistic knowledge, or that chase for it, or that seeking of knowledge that we're looking in the wrong place for, when we should be looking to maybe philosophers, maybe that's maybe that's
I think you're right. I think the impulse that makes people join cults and believe in conspiracy theories actually begins as a good impulse to be wiser, to be more knowledgeable, to figure things out, right? A conspiracy theorist is trying to figure things out and solve a mystery. They get off track, of course. People who join a cult are also hungry for something, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that makes them weak necessarily.
No.
But what happens is, and this brings it right back to Socrates, the main dude, is we acquire these beliefs and we don't question them anymore, and we're then just going down that train track to some destination, and we don't know why we're going there, but we're trying to go as fast as we can. And what Socrates did back in ancient Athens is he would go around and he would annoy people, basically, and ask them difficult questions. Like, he'd find a general who says, you must know a lot about courage. Oh, yes, I know. And he would start to ask him, well, what is courage? And the general would give some half-baked, lame answer. And so most people would be satisfied with that and say, well, thank you, General. You're a very, very courageous, wise man. But no, Socrates would push and say, well, where did you get this belief? And what about that? Do you know this to be true? And it's pissed people off, as it does now. But it's funny, we always think that other people have these entrenched beliefs, but never us. It's sort of like when you're in traffic, you're like, oh, damn, all this damn traffic, not realizing that you are part of the traffic, right? So it's easy to look at people in cults and conspiracy theorists and say, well, I'm not like them. I don't have any false beliefs like them, but we all do. Right. Yep. And we don't see them. I mean, trying to know your false beliefs is trying to see your eyeball,
Yeah.
You can't do it. So that's why not being isolated helps, getting out of the echo chamber. Socrates thought philosophy should be practiced in the buddy system, sort of like we're doing here, have a conversation. He was not, we think of philosophers as going off into the mountain and thinking deep thoughts alone. And a few of them did that, but not many. Most of them were pretty social, or intermittently social. So we sort of need to have conversations and with people who are not just like us. Socrates talked to everyone in Athens and not just people just like him. And so we get our beliefs reinforced. If you're in a cult, you don't get any outside messages. If you're a conspiracy theorist, you just go to those websites.
Yeah.
And if you're a liberal, you'll go to certain websites and not others as well. So that is not a recipe for wisdom. It's a recipe for a kind of knowledge that becomes a cage, really, that traps you.
There's sometimes where I focus on different topics. I mean, I've led some adventures through my life. Like I went through some years where I tried to be a photographer and be a good or great photographer. Bought all the cameras and, all that sort of stuff. And I go through these adventures and I would try and, I think a lot of us are searching for meaning, whether it's religion or cults or conspiracies or just everyday life. Sometimes we're just like, why am I here? Like one of my favorite things is, what was that one movie where Jack Palance, I think it was, he goes, you got to find the one thing. And I think a lot of people are looking for that. And sometimes it's like what you have in the book here, day-to-day motivation. Like, I don't know if I can get out of bed today. That's pretty much every day for me. Fortunately, I have two huskies that will annoy the crap out of me to get out of bed. I don't know if Marcus Aurelius.
Marcus, it was actually that sense of outside himself, some sense of duty, not as a emperor or as a Roman or as a philosopher, but as a human being to help other people. And that was what ultimately got him out of bed. And that's, your huskies are important actually, because they, not just because they're probably licking your face and jumping all over you to get out of bed, but because they're reminding you, oh yeah, there's another sentient being who's dependent on me. Yeah. And, that sense of duty got Marcus out of bed.
There you go. If I don't, they'll be on the floor too. So there's that. Yeah. Well,
your huskies are. I
could teach Marcus Aurelius a couple things, evidently.
Your huskies could teach him something too. They sound like two philosophical dogs.
Sometimes I don't know when they're not peeing on the rug. I know this is a special book because I was trying to find the chapter you're referring to earlier. It's got 0 page numbers. So I was trying to find the chapter earlier. But what's interesting at the beginning of your chapter, it appears that you have like a little. a timestamp and
Yes.
some sort of thing. Tell us what that's
Right.
about.
So there's a train. There are several trains in this book. I like trains. I don't know how you feel about trains.
I like
train
trains.
travel.
Yeah, I used to have trains when I was a kid.
I don't like trains the way foamers. A foamer is someone who's a train nut who gets so excited at some locomotive he starts to froth at the mouth and foam. I'm not like that. I just like the experience of taking a long train ride.
Yeah.
And so I did. So in the course of researching this book, I mean, I traveled to where all these philosophers did their thinking and where they lived and died. And I took just train rides for the heck of it. I took Amtrak from my home in Washington, D.C. to Portland, Oregon, took 4 days, 3 nights, took a train across India, across Europe. And each chapter opens with me on a train. Short little ditty. It's sort of an intermission between philosophical acts. And I'm thinking on a train. And I can think on trains. I cannot think on an airplane. I don't know if you've ever tried to think on an airplane. It is physically impossible, I believe, to think on an airplane. The air is thin. The leg room is too short. But on something about a train, in a long train ride, where you feel like it's just you have all the time in the world, that's when I can think. And so, it's sort of one long train of thought, you might say.
There you go. Whoa, he hit the thing there. Maybe I should try a long train ride. I mean,
you should take the show.
My wife has been telling me to go on a train and never come back. So no, I'm not. So there's jokes.
She's kidding. She's kidding.
So this explains the cover. We'll plug this again here for the plug of you on a train.
It's not necessary. I got one here. Okay.
Well, okay.
Yes.
It's not about who has the bigger book, Eric.
No, it's not. But if it were, mine's bigger. So he's thinking there, and he's looking out the window, and I don't know.
Why is he naked though? That's really what I want to know. What's going on there? I'm not sure you can do that on a train.
Yeah, chapter 2 would explain all that. The Greeks had some funny ideas about sex and things.
This
like
is
that,
the thinker.
That's for another. Yeah, he's a thinker.
This is my friend gave me my business partner actually had given me the statue of the thinker years ago. Not the statue, but a replica. And because in my business, I used to challenge a lot of my thinking, a lot of stuff we built for our companies. I used what I call the crazy Ivan effect. And so what I would do is I would run off on weekends with on little jaunts or vacations, we call them. And I'd take a yellow pad and paper and I'd sit and think about my business and why we did things. And sometimes I'd just take apart whole things that I had forgotten that I had built, actually. And so I'd be like, why do we do things this way? And they're like, I don't know, you built the systems that way, Chris. I'm like, I did? Well, why did I do it that way? And so I would do this crazy Ivan reverse inlet, and nothing was off limits. I mean, that's kind of the way my brain works on philosophy and religion and
I think crazy Ivan is philosophy, basically. I think you've...
And so I basically do that internal wilderness of mirrors where I try and look inside and try and get over whatever unconscious or conscious biases I have. I challenge them, why do you believe in this stupid crap? I don't know. That sort of thing.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't get an answer, at least not right away. But it's important to ask the question, and we don't ask the question. And we don't, in one of the characters I meet in the book, a living character, is a guy named Jacob Needleman, who's a cool dude, philosopher from out in San Francisco. And I took the train across the country to meet with him. And he said, the problem is in this country is we're always rushing to solve our problems or to find pleasure, but we don't sit and experience questions. And I thought that was a very profound thing to say, that we're big into problem solving, and we want to get past the question as quickly as possible and get to the solution. And we think that's just automatically good. But are we willing to sit with the question? It's uncomfortable. You think, well, I should change my career. What should I do? I need to find the answer. And you just frantically look for, you Google career changes, and you can't rest until you find it. And we need to sort of be willing to sit with uncomfortable questions for a little while. I mean, you're still working them through, but you're not rushing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the themes in my book, is just to slow down. I mean,
Yeah.
there was a philosopher named Wittgenstein who called philosophy the slow cure. And he said that all philosophers should greet each other with, instead of, have a nice day, should be have a slow day or something like that, and something actually useful. It's sort of just pausing, like what you did with your business partner, probably was not the most immediately productive. I would say, a few minutes out of your day. And probably he was like, Chris, what are you talking about? We got stuff to do.
We got stuff to do. That's why I do it on the weekends, because we'd be driving in the car, kind of like you in the train. And I'd be trapped in the car. He or a girlfriend would be driving, and I'd be sitting there in the passenger seat, nothing to do. You're on these long drives where you're just between Utah and California. And so I'd be stuck there with my notepad. So I'd start writing and tinkering, and I would do it this way. I don't know. But I love the concept of what you said, experience questioning, and kind of revel in it or wallow in it, if you will. And you're right. I think a lot of people, there are some times in my day where I either have insecurities or I need some hope, and I go looking for hope. Sometimes I go to the news. Sometimes I go to the WAPO.
No, don't do that.
Yeah. Sometimes I go different places. Sometimes I go to Twitter. That's a mistake. Let's talk about Dunning-Kruger, the Dunning-Kruger effect. A lot of people fall into that too, in that search for knowledge, and that probably. Should
we explain what that is, or does everyone know what that is?
I'll let you take.
It's my understanding of it is essentially, sum it up very simply, that we don't know what we don't know, that we are ignorant of our own ignorance. Mm-hmm. And people in this Dunning and Kruger were two psychologists, and they did these studies and essentially found out people are convinced they know something when they don't. And it takes a lot to change their mind. So we don't know what we don't know. And I would argue a lot of us don't care to know what we don't know. We're like, well, we know that. We don't, But in fact, that's how, that leads to groupthink. It leads to a lot of stupidity, actually. And it's stupidity not of the ignorant, but people who are ignorant of their ignorance. And I know this sounds highfalutin, but it's and Socrates talked about this 2,500 years before Dunning-Kruger was, so brief little history is this oracle at Delphi says, Socrates is the wisest man in all of Athens. He thought, me? Wise? No, I'm just a dude. I walk around barefoot. I'm a stonecutter's son. So he went around asking people questions in Athens, and he realized they thought they knew all these things about courage and beauty, and they didn't know jack. So then Socrates famously said, well, at least I know what I don't know. So maybe I am the wisest man. And we don't know what we don't know, which is tricky. It's not questioning the knowledge you do have. It's sort of questioning the unknown unknowns, things out there that we don't know, and living with that. Look, right now, talk about uncertainty. When will there be a vaccine? When will life return to something resembling normal? We don't know, and that makes us uneasy. And that's a dangerous time, because people will turn to snake oil salesmen and others who will give them quick and easy answers, because we don't, as human beings, I don't know what you think about this, we don't do very well with uncertainty. It tends to drive us nuts. But the philosophers in my book, and I would agree with them, a lot of them think that does not need to be the case, that life is uncertain, but we can build up our tolerance for that. And some people, if you've noticed this, have a higher tolerance for uncertainty. They tend to live in the moment and that sort of thing. So it's not like uncertainty is equally bad, and it's like, being shot in the head and it's bad for all of us. I don't know where that came from, but you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like some people have this tolerance for it, and some people even are okay with it. They're like, I don't know where I'm going to be a year from now, and I'm okay with that. And other people would be like, whoa, I need to know where I'll be 5 seconds from now.
And you're right. That comes back to, like you say, when people go look for conspiracy things, I think they're trying to accumulate wisdom, and they don't realize they're just accumulating some knowledge.
And they're looking for certainty. They're looking for certainty. They're clinging to the certainty part.
Yeah.
And wisdom is it's not that kind of certainty. It's something more fluid that you're always willing to change. The epigraph, that's a little quote at the top of my book, is from this French philosopher, and he says, "Sooner or later, life makes philosophers of us all." And I think that's true. I think
that's very true.
You know, there's some people say, "I never contemplate anything." I think right now, everyone's thinking, what the F, you know, what do I do? And
I'm learning more at 50. I've learned more about 50 about myself and about life and what I don't know, partially because I have this great history to look back on of wreckage and go, yeah, there's a pattern there, man. Like when I was 20, there wasn't any wreckage. So there was no pattern to look back on. You couldn't look back and go, yeah, there's kind of a theme going on there. But now
Nietzsche, the philosopher Nietzsche famously said, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." You know, it's been debated. Some people say what doesn't kill you leaves you maimed and bitter for the rest of your life. But in your case, it sounds like your childhood, whatever you went through, I don't know all the details, but it was tough, rough, and it didn't kill you. Did it make you stronger? Did it make you stronger?
I'm still bitter though. No, just kidding. No, but one thing you were talking about, I wish somebody had sat down and explained this to me, but I sat down with my niece and nephew early this year because they were both starting to graduate from school. And I realized they were at a pivotal point that I wish someone had told me some stuff. When I sat down with them and I tried to compile in a writing to them everything that I wish someone had told me when I was 20 and shit that I didn't figure out sometimes till I was 50. And one of those things was, I said, let me explain something to you. In life, there are three things. There are what you know, there are what you don't know, and there are what you don't know you don't know. And there are lots of times where I go searching in my life. Sometimes I go searching for information. This is one of the reasons I really enjoy this podcast, because I have brilliant people like you on who come open my mind, expand it. Hopefully my audience has the same experience and gets me thinking about stuff that, wow, I never thought of that before, or I didn't even know it existed before. And so
the truth is, Chris, that this podcast is a philosophy podcast.
Wow.
In disguise. I would not change the name to the philosophy podcast. Keep the Chris Voss Show. That's good. Mm-hmm. But I'm very serious, actually. What you're doing from the episodes I've watched, and certainly our conversation, is philosophy.
Thank you.
So
does this mean I got to wear one of them fucking robes with the sandals and shit?
Yeah, it does. And and you no, this is the problem is it's sort of what's the word I'm looking for? It's stealth philosophy is what I do in my book. It's the ideas are getting in there, but I try to write in an accessible way. Mm-hmm. I'm a fan of what Einstein famously said once. He said, if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough. Mm-hmm. If you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough. And so I think my job as a writer is to read all these dense academic books, understand them, and explain them simply, explain the ideas simply. And that's what I've tried to do in all my books, and certainly in this one.
And what I like about your book is it's just not philosophy coming at you like to be or not to be, do or do not. There is no. I was going to quote you.
You're free associating, but go ahead.
I'm just making it up.
That was Shakespeare, actually, but that's okay.
Make one great. I don't know. Is Yoda a philosopher? Anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Yoda's definitely. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, very wise.
Pizza is not pizza with pineapple. I think he said that. But what's interesting about your book throughout it is you're not just, like I said, throwing philosophy sayings at you. You're kind of sharing the introspective and telling a story that you're going through and your experience and stuff like that, which is really nice. You're talking about the train ride and you're like incorporating it all into this thing. And so, it's just not, like if you ever read a philosophy book, or somebody, like a quote book or something, or you see some on the internet where it's just like, the way is not the way if the way is the way. And you're like,
no way.
No way.
Right.
There you go.
No, thank you. And that's what I try to do is I try on these philosophies and apply them to everyday situations. Like walking my dog and using Gandhi's tactics of nonviolence.
Let's get into that, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So my dog had to fight like Gandhi. So
there you go.
All these philosophers are misunderstood, but probably none more than Gandhi, because most people think of him as this, kind of saint-like figure, very passive and meek. And he was a badass, really. Gandhi was. He was tough. And he wrote a lot about the need for courage and manliness. And he thought that you needed to fight. The worst thing than violence was cowardice. But he did think you should fight nonviolently and get into this sort of good trouble that John Lewis talked about. John Lewis studied Gandhi. And his ideas are extremely practical. He wasn't perfect, but he was tough and in a nonviolent way. So he would oppose a law. If he thought it was unjust, he would say, I'm going to break this law at 2 p.m. tomorrow because I don't think it's a good law, and you're welcome to arrest me. And he would go and do it, and he would get arrested, and he would serve his time. And he felt that you had to point out how do I put this? You point out by being human yourself, you're extremely human, let's put it that way, you point out the inhumanity of the oppressor, of the police, right? So if there's violence on the part of protesters, that muddies the waters. Gandhi thought you must be incredibly strict and disciplined in your ranks, not the least amount of violence to be used as an excuse by others, and also because it's the right thing to do. So if I used a word to describe it, it would be badass, if I can say that on the Chris Voss Show. Disciplined and loving. And it's a strange combination. We don't find that in people these days. I think in John Lewis we saw it, in a few other people, but that combination of toughness and love it's not something you see every day.
So maybe, according to your book, we should get back to some of the basics. Like, I can't remember, I think John Wooden, it was the basketball coach who used to always say, let's go back to the basics. Maybe we should be going back to the basics more. The original core of philosophy, some of these original philosophers, and stick with the stuff that works.
Yeah. There was a philosopher named William James, an American guy, who said, truth is what works. And by that, he did not mean I can say 2 + 2 = 5 or some conspiracy theory or whatever. He meant that if you try something out in your life and it works and makes you a better person, then it's good. I mean, I could say, Chris, running 3 miles a day is good for you, and you could study it and look for studies and find studies that say, no, it's not actually good for you. And I'm like, or you could just start running 3 miles a day, and you're like, I don't understand this, but it's working. So there's a certain, wisdom is actually, in philosophy, I'll leave you with this thought, maybe, is this the most practical thing in the world? I mean, it is. People think it's this impractical subject that, oh God, I hope my kid doesn't major in philosophy. Teaching you how to think and how to think about life, what the hell is more practical than that?
It's a great toolbox to have, because if you have it, then everything else revolves around that. You can solve.
And it's portable. You can take it with you, this toolbox. And also the toolbox from 2,000 years ago works just as well now. It hasn't rusted out. In fact, you can pick up their tools and throw it in your toolbox.
Yeah. I mean, the great thing is there's a reason this stuff has stood the test of time. And we're talking about it today, and we probably won't be talking about QAnon like 3,000, 4,000 years from now.
Or either won't be talking about it, or it would be the only thing we're allowed to talk about, one or the other. But I would say
we could be there too.
You're right. The test of time, that's a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true. A cliche is something that has stood the test of time. That's what a cliche is. So I would say that you're right about this wisdom, that it's stuck around for a reason. There's a reason. And Socrates didn't give us really any knowledge. He gave us a method, right? And these methods are actually what's more important, because all the stuff we think we know today, I guarantee you in 1,000 years, if not 500 years or sooner, a lot of it is going to be looked at as just absurd, and wrong. But the method of how we get at knowing stuff and being wiser, that ages very well. Ages better than you and I, for instance.
Yeah. There are times where I come to the end of the day and I've read so much BS or argued about so much BS, and sometimes you look back on it and you go, on a lot of timeline and a hill of beans and all the sands of the ocean lapping against the shore, this isn't going to matter. Like,
so Marcus called it the view from above, that you picture yourself way up there in the stratosphere and you look down. I mean, he didn't know about space travel, of course, but now we can picture, you picture like being way up there in orbit and you look down at Earth. That's got to give you some perspective. Yeah. Look at that view from above and you're like, I'm worrying over this, or these two people are fighting over that little dot down there within the other dot, and when you look at the view from above, you tend to, it makes the heaviness of your burden less heavy, right? You're like, doesn't really matter. And you sort of see the interconnectivity. I think the astronauts who went to the moon commented that, you just realize it's just this pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan said, and we're all floating through space on it. And why can't we all get along? Because it's ridiculous otherwise.
Yeah, it's a giant, what have I likened it to sometimes when I've written, it's a giant kind of lifeboat, and we're all rocking it and doing all sorts of stuff to sink it. And
some people are punching holes in it, and trying to throw other people off the lifeboat, and some people are just complaining that we need a bigger lifeboat. This isn't going to work, and
and so it's an interesting. Was there anything cathartic that you found when you? Let me ask you this. We'll combine that question if you don't mind me stacking that. But
sure.
when you went to write each chapter, were you and you were on a certain train, were you planning on like, I'm going to focus on this thing, or was there something cathartic in the experience that drew you to, like, you're on the train and you're like, this is an interesting way to go with this?
I mean, I tried to have an idea about a chapter in a philosopher before I dove in, but be totally open to throwing that idea away. Which means throwing work away. So I arrived, for instance, in Concord, Massachusetts, and I'm going to write about Henry David Thoreau, who famously wrote Walden Pond. He was the guy who went off and spent 2 years living in a cabin. And I thought for sure that chapter was going to be called How to Be Alone Like Thoreau, or How to Live Simply Like Thoreau. First of all, it turns out he was 20 minutes away from this bustling town of Concord, and he'd go in to get his laundry done 3 times a week and get his mom's cooking 2 times a week. And he had lots of visitors. So first of all, it was not the way it appeared. And second of all, I realized that, when I started talking to people, just having open-ended conversations with people who know Thoreau, and I would say, well, what do you think he was about? I've got some ideas, but I want to hear, what do you think? If you were writing a how-to chapter about Thoreau, what would it be about? This woman named Leslie Wilson, who was a curator at the local library, said, how to see. It was about how to see. And I never thought of Thoreau as like being about vision and seeing. And then I started to read his journals and read about it, and it turns out it was about seeing. That all that solitude or supposed solitude, that was all about seeing more beauty and seeing more clearly. So that's just like an example of, you go in with an idea and you're willing to throw it out and go down a different road, even if it's not efficient. Mm-hmm. Efficiency is one of, I don't know. I think a lot of our problems today are caused by this focus on speed and efficiency at the expense of other virtues. And let's be clear, being fast and efficient is not just a good thing. It is what we've decided is good. There's nothing that says efficiency and speed are inherently good.
And would you say that's because people aren't busy trying to experience their questions? They're going for that quick fix, instead of going home, making a nice healthy meal, you go for McDonald's, so that sort of thing, that quick consumerism.
Yeah, it has to do with, I think the question of how much is enough. Right. I think we could talk for another hour about this, but there's a philosopher named Epicurus I write about who talks a lot about this, but we don't really answer the question, how much is enough? We don't know. We just think it's more. People who are worth hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, they feel they don't have enough. How can that be? And they might continue to work because they enjoy it, but if it comes from the sense of lack, that we don't have enough, and how fast is fast enough? That's a philosophical question. That's not a technological question. Is 600 miles per hour in an airplane fast enough? We would say, no, faster is better. We can go to New York to California in an hour and a half. That would be better. Would it? Is faster always better? Is more always better? And that's, I don't know how we get onto this subject, but that's how we get into trouble. And Epicurus, the philosopher of pleasure, defined pleasure differently. He thought that it was an absence of suffering. And once you had an absence of disturbance in your life, that was enough. That was it. And anything beyond that was just, you're playing games with yourself. You're varying the pleasure. And he thought pleasure varied does not equal pleasure increased. Yeah. So I don't know. You've got one.
My wife and my mistress tell me this all the time. So,
and he would say that you're. Well, I won't go there, but he would say basically, it's this. Our whole consumer economy is based on the fact that a variety of pleasures is better than just one simple pleasure. And and he makes a compelling case for choosing the simple pleasures so you don't become a prisoner of the fancy pleasures. You go out for a fancy meal, costs $500 for wine and everything, and you enjoy it, but now you're kind of addicted to that experience. You've got to replicate it. You've got to do 9 podcasts, just to make enough money to have that meal again,
Oh, you're like psychoanalyzing me. Still trying to figure out what the 10th one's going to be. No, I'm just kidding. So,
there you go. It'd be the Chris and Eric show.
There you go. The Chris and Eric philosophy show. And then I'll come up with one of those little thorny crowns that they used to wear in Athens and shit. The philosophers did. And then I'll get the robe. I already wear sandals. I wear flip-flops. So I'm already halfway. See, I'm already a philosopher, really, when it comes down to it. I just don't know it.
It's true. It's actually true.
It's one of those things that I don't know that I don't know that I don't know. Anyway, this has been a great discussion. Anything more you want to leave with us on why people should pick up the book and good stuff?
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Look at the friendly man. Look at the friendly naked man on the train. Philosophy is not a 4-letter word. You have nothing to fear and everything to gain in terms of wisdom. And I say, come along for the ride with me. You will learn something. You'll be a bit wiser, and you'll have some fun. You'll definitely have some fun.
I like how I love the way you play it out with where you're on the train, and you're going through the experience with you, and so it becomes a narrative. Because I could tell you, if I read philosophy or like a quote section of a website, it can get really dry fast. You're like, the whys, the wheres, the when, and the when. You're like, what the fuck do I do with this?
Right.
And, you help explain it and you go through the journey. We're going through the journey with you, almost like a bit of a catharsis.
I'm figuring it out. You're figuring it out as I figure it out. The only difference is I spent 4 years reading a whole bunch of books back there. So you didn't have to. It's personal. If a philosophy isn't personal, what good is it? Like, well, you can have an impersonal philosophy of life. What the heck is that about? No, it's personal. You might agree with my take on things, and you might disagree, but I guarantee you'll think. And that's
if you ponder it, ponder the thing. Yeah. And the beautiful part is you spent 4 years developing the data, and they can get it in the Socrates Express very fastly in a read that won't take 4 years, unless you're a really slow reader, or unless you really want to. What was that term that we had that we've been using here? Experience the question.
Experience the questions. You could read a sentence a month. And think about experience that sentence for a month and then move on. That works. Sure.
There you go. Guys, it's been wonderful to have Eric on. Eric, give us your plugs one more time so people can check out your webs.
So my latest book is The Socrates Express, In Search of Life Lessons from Dead Philosophers. I also wrote a book people may have heard of called The Geography of Bliss. You can find out more about all my various writings and doings at ericweinerbooks.com. Weiner spelled Weiner. I'm on Twitter at Eric_Weiner, although I try not to spend too much time there.
Yeah, it's a pretty toxic place. Thanks to my audience for tuning in. Be sure to go to thecvpn.com for your friends, neighbors, relatives. The show's been exploding with referrals. And also go to youtube.com/Chris Voss if you want to see the video version of this. You can also go to amazon.com/shop/Chris Voss. You can see all the books of all these great authors. Just run up your credit card, purchase them all and all that good stuff, and you'll just learn so much. Like, it'll make you better looking. People will be attracted to you. You might lose some weight because you'll be busy, I don't know, reading or something. And yeah, do it. Do it now. Anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. We certainly appreciate you guys. Love you. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.